Westridge Prep had rules, some spoken, most not. When Imani and Naomi Reese stepped through its iron gates, they didn't just enter a school, they entered a test. No welcome banners. No smiles. Just eyes that asked, "Why are you here?" In a place where tradition masked exclusion, two calm girls carried something unseen but unmistakable. They didn't flinch. They didn't speak. But someone was already watching. Someone who would soon realize, these girls weren't here to fit in. They were here to change everything. The morning wind carried the scent of cedar mulch and cold dew as Imani and Naomi Reese stepped through the iron gates of Westridge Prep. Two calm shadows in a place that had never expected them. The school grounds, meticulous and hushed, spread before them like a portrait meant to be observed from afar, not entered. Ivy crept over aged stone walls. Bronze plaques glinted beneath the soft overcast light. Somewhere deeper in the courtyard, a bell rang, not urgent, but final. Their father's voice brushed against Imani's thoughts like wind across a blade. Not all wars are loud. Win the silent ones first. They didn't speak. They never needed to, not here, not now. A pair of junior boys paused mid-step as the girls approached, lingering just a moment too long in the path. One of them, sandy-haired with a smug jawline, locked eyes with Imani like he was sizing a threat. She didn't blink. Naomi shifted slightly left, brushing past with her satchel angled sharp across her chest. As she passed, the taller boy murmured, "Interesting choice of school." The words barely grazed the air, but Naomi's fingers curled tighter around the strap. Imani kept walking. The boys laughed behind them. Light, practiced, meant to float rather than land, but it still scraped. Beyond the east archway, a figure leaned half-hidden against the stone column. Autumn Hale adjusted the lens of her camera, lowering it just in time to capture Naomi's profile, chin tilted, jaw set, as she passed beneath the arch. No pose, just presence. Autumn didn't move, she just watched. The main hallway smelled of varnished floors and restraint. Every trophy case gleamed, every poster was straight. But the air between lockers bent around glances, glances that darted and lingered, assessed and dismissed. Imani's eyes swept the hallway like someone reading a language not spoken aloud. Her gaze snagged on a whisper behind a locker door. A girl with polished curls was nudging another's elbow, nodding toward Naomi's braided bun. Naomi noticed. She always noticed. But she didn't flinch. Not even when her name was mispronounced from a distance. Not even when a voice said, "Which one do you think is the smart one?" Just loud enough to be caught and discarded. At the base of the stairs, a leaf crunched beneath Naomi's heel. A sharp, clear sound in the hush. Imani's eyes flicked down. Small, dead, stepped over. They reached their first classroom just as the final bell vibrated through the floorboards. Ryan Briggs leaned casually against the doorway, arms crossed, voice dipped in sarcasm. "You lost?" Naomi stopped for half a second, then stepped forward. Imani, right beside her, didn't break stride, but her eyebrow arched. Just enough, no reply. The door opened. They entered. The hush they left behind was heavier than the one they walked into. Autumn Hale, still in the hallway, lowered her camera slowly. Her breath fogged the viewfinder. "They're not like the others," she whispered. Every hallway at Westridge had corners designed for whispers, and today, all of them knew the twins' names. The echoes started early, rippling through the tiled corridors like a scent of chlorine before a storm. A locker clanged shut too loudly. Laughter bounced too quickly off the walls. Words didn't have to be said clearly when stares and snickers filled the silence. Mid-October light streamed through high windows, slanting shadows along the floor. The wind outside tugged at the courtyard trees, and every gust seemed to sharpen the edges of conversation. Naomi adjusted the collar of her navy sweater, eyes forward as she passed a group of girls near the science wing. One leaned in and whispered behind a manicured hand. The others didn't laugh. They just nodded. That was worse. Imani moved with a steadiness that looked practiced, but her eyes flicked too fast for comfort. She scanned details. Exits. Faces. A game of quiet survival. Near the language wing, A shoulder clipped Imani's arm. Sharp, fast, followed by a half-mumbled, "Didn't see you." She didn't look back. 5 steps later, it happened again. A different boy. Same smirk. Naomi's fingers curled at her side. Their father's voice echoed like breath between them. Silence isn't surrender, it's reconnaissance. The day crawled toward lunch. In the courtyard, benches stood half-empty under a pale sky. The chill had teeth. Naomi sat with her tray across from Imani, who was tracing the edge of her water bottle with a single finger. Across the quad, Ryan Briggs leaned back on a bench, legs wide, voice just loud enough. "Looking sharp, matching housekeepers." Zach and Trey laughed on cue. The sound was too eager, like dogs trying to catch scent. Imani didn't look up, but her fork paused mid-air. Her fingers stayed clenched longer than necessary. Naomi whispered, "1 more inch." Autumn Hale stood under a red-leafed maple, camera slung low, forgotten in her grip. She watched Ryan's head tilt back in a laugh, saw the sharp glint in his smile. Instinctively, she raised the camera and snapped the shot. Then paused, lowered the lens, looked again. She didn't like the way it felt in her hands. Inside the cafeteria, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The noise level rose with the scent of salt and steam. Naomi bent to pick up a napkin and spotted her biology book kicked halfway under the next table. Imani reached for it. Naomi stopped her. "I've got it," she said. Her voice was quiet. Her hands weren't. From 3 tables down, Ryan watched with lazy interest. His foot tapped once against the floor. Autumn, now seated with her yearbook team, turned to see the moment unfold. She didn't raise the camera this time. She just stared. Naomi retrieved the book, slid back into her seat. Her jaw tightened. Her breathing shallowed. Then it happened. Barely a flicker. Her chin trembled. Autumn noticed. Her heart moved. Imani saw it too. Leaned in, voice low. "Breathe. Don't let them draw your shape." Naomi nodded once. Bit the inside of her cheek. The moment passed, but it left a bruise. Later that night, Autumn stood in the dark room, lit only by red light and the hum of machines. The photo she hadn't deleted floated into focus, a shot of Ryan mid-laugh, triumphant and small at once. She held it in her hand for a long time, then turned it over. Wrote 4 words, "This will matter." The locker paint was still wet when Naomi touched it, and the laughter behind her was still echoing when she clenched her fists. It was a red so bright it nearly burned under the hallway's buzzing fluorescence. Letters dripped down in crude slants. 4 slurs, 2 drawings, and a message that wasn't meant to be clever, only cruel. Imani's breath hitched, but she said nothing. Naomi stood a step behind, her eyes narrowing. Her fingers brushed the metal surface before she realized red came away on her skin. Behind them, a cluster of students hovered like flies around a wound. Phones rose. Clicks echoed. No one tried to hide their grins. The hallway was damp with late October mist tracked in by muddy shoes. It clung to the glass windows, the backs of coats, and now to the silence that followed Naomi and Imani wherever they walked. From the side, Zach's voice cut through the fog. "Oops. Guess art class started early this year." Trey snorted. Ryan just leaned against a nearby locker, arms folded, his mouth curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. Mr. Connors, their first period history teacher, passed the scene without slowing. His eyes met Imani's for a second, then slid away. A crumpled paper note fell from the top vent of Imani's locker. She didn't pick it up. Naomi turned to her sister. "Are we still just watching?" Imani didn't answer. Not yet. Autumn Hale passed by like she hadn't seen anything. But her camera was already at her side, and her eyes flicked, once to the lockers, once to Ryan, once to the quiet fury on Naomi's face. She didn't stop, but before she disappeared around the corner, she slipped something into the open spine of Naomi's textbook on a nearby bench. Naomi retrieved it later. A single black and white photo, folded once. It showed Ryan, half turned, a can of spray paint in his hand. Night sky behind him. Concrete wall. No smile. Just focus. Imani stared at it. The silence between the sisters thickened into something neither could name yet. By third period, the janitor had covered the graffiti with primer. A pale smear remained. The hallway smelled like paint and disinfectant. Naomi moved slower than usual. Her eyes scanned walls. Hands. Shadows. She was waiting, measuring. Imani was already there. Inside her stillness, something had shifted. As the lunch bell rang, they sat under the courtyard's dying oak tree. The sky was dull. A breeze pulled yellow leaves from the branches and scattered them like ashes. Imani's voice was low, steady. "Next time, I move." Naomi looked at her. Really looked. Then nodded once. The fire behind her eyes said everything. Later that day, as announcements crackled across the intercom, a voice came through that made both sisters pause. Autumn hail. Calm, even. Photo club meeting moved to Thursday. Attendance required. It wasn't the words or the paint or even the laughter. It was the silence of the adults that finally snapped something inside Naomi. The morning air was heavy with gray clouds, low and dragging, as though Westridge itself were weighed down by the things it refused to say. Halloween decorations fluttered limply in the breeze. Orange streamers tangled around benches. Paper skeletons dampened the edges from dew, but nothing masked the vandalism. Again, this time, the graffiti wasn't on their lockers. It was smeared across the white marble bench near the science building. Black letters, the same slurs. A cartoon face, exaggerated and cruel. The same scent of spray paint, sharp as contempt. A janitor worked quietly, sponge in one hand, spray bottle in the other. Naomi stood in front of him for a full 30 seconds. He never looked up, just scrubbed, slower. Her fist didn't clench. Her face didn't twist. But something in her posture changed. Shoulders straightened, chin lifted, as though her very spine had chosen a side. Imani joined her. No words passed between them. By lunch, the cafeteria hummed with its usual chorus of trays clattering and laughter too loud to be genuine. Naomi and Imani sat at a table near the window, their food untouched. Ryan passed behind them and dropped a banana peel at Imani's feet. Not carelessly, deliberately, loud enough, obvious enough. Zach and Trey followed, snickering. A few heads turned. One teacher looked up from her tablet. No one moved. Imani didn't pick it up. Naomi didn't blink. At the back of the room, Autumn Hale lowered her camera, not to her lap this time, but to the table. She opened her bag and pulled out a plain manila envelope. Inside, she placed 6 photos. One time-stamped image of Ryan holding the spray can. One of the vandalized lockers. Another of Naomi's face mid-turn, jaw set. 3 more showing students laughing as teachers walked by. She sealed the envelope. No name on the front. Just slid it into her jacket. After lunch, she detoured. Past the media lab, through the main office hallway, she stopped at the door marked Faculty Lounge, Staff Only, glanced over her shoulder. Slipped the envelope into the mail bin. No one saw her do it. She made sure of that. Back in the hallway, Imani stood before the marble bench again. The cleaning job was sloppy. Gray streaks smudged across the surface, like shame someone tried to rinse off but couldn't. Students walked around her, avoided eye contact. Mr. Connors passed by on his way to class. Slowed. Then kept walking. Imani waited until Naomi joined her. Then, without raising her voice, she said, "This ends tomorrow." Naomi didn't nod quickly or dramatically. She just stood beside her sister, her silence now a weapon sharpened over weeks. That night, Autumn sat on the edge of her bed, laptop open, message drafts unsent. Her phone buzzed once. An unknown number. "We saw what you did. Stay out of it." She stared at the screen, then at her camera, resting on the desk. The lens cap was off. The school day moved like a held breath, everyone waiting for something, but no one knowing what. The Westridge auditorium, normally abuzz with idle chatter and careless shuffling, felt uncharacteristically still that morning. Rows of mahogany chairs creaked under the weight of anticipation. Somewhere in the overhead rafters, a faint hum from the old heating vents added to the tension, like a drum roll too slow to hear. Imani and Naomi Reese walked to the front row. Not late, not early, exactly on time. Their footsteps were soft but deliberate, the echo of each soul against the hardwood stage flooring a quiet declaration. They didn't speak. They sat, the faculty took note, even if they pretended not to. Mr. Connors lowered his coffee. Miss Callahan turned in her seat, her brows knitting just slightly. Principal Hargrove stood at the podium, flipping through his notes, unaware that the room he presided over had already shifted. 2 rows back, Autumn Hale sat with her camera in her lap. Not to photograph, but to remind herself what she'd seen. Her hand rested on the edge of her coat pocket, fingers brushing the cold edge of a flash drive. At the end of the assembly, while students rose in waves, Autumn made her move. Quietly, smoothly, she stepped over to Miss Callahan near the side exit. Their eyes met briefly. Then Autumn slipped the flash drive into her palm and kept walking. No words. Just a nod. Miss Callahan stared after her, the plastic edge biting her palm. By mid-morning the whispers had changed, no longer about what the twins might do, but what they already had. Ryan's laughter wasn't as loud. Trey walked with a little more glance over the shoulder. Zach avoided the twins altogether. Naomi and Imani said nothing. In the hallway, at lunch, in class. But when they passed the school trophy case near the library, Naomi paused. There, nestled between the polished plaques and dusted awards, stood a new photo, carefully printed, cleanly matted, and slid between the glass. Ryan Briggs, grinning. Spray can in hand. Midnight timestamp burned into the bottom corner. No caption, no need. Miss Callahan stood in front of it moments later. She didn't look around, she just stared. The day closed slowly. Teachers walked with eyes wider. Students parted more respectfully. No announcement came. No confrontation occurred. But something had already changed, something quiet and permanent. That evening, the Reese household was silent, except for the creak of the old garage door sliding shut. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows across the floor mats. Imani and Naomi stood barefoot, uniforms crisp, hair tied back. They bowed, then moved. A kata began, fluid, precise. Each step mirrored, each strike restrained but grounded. Their movements carved through the air with intention, not anger. Naomi's focus was sharp. Imani's presence, unwavering. Every stance was the answer to a question, unspoken. Marshall Reese watched from the folding chair, near the tool rack. Arms crossed, eyes steady. When they finished, breath measured and hands open at their sides, he said only one word, tomorrow. Principal Hargrove sat at his desk that night, sipping lukewarm tea when his email pinged. Subject, watch the tapes from October 27th. No name, no body text. Just the date. By noon, 3 teachers had requested meetings. By 3 o'clock, Ryan Briggs was suspended. The shift began in whispers. First in the front office, where Ms. Callahan quietly requested access to hallway security logs, and then in the faculty lounge, where Mr. Connors sat unusually quiet with his hands folded, a printed photo of Ryan in front of him. The same photo that had once rested in the trophy case now lay at the center of a much more serious discussion. At the entrance of Westridge Prep, Marshall Reese stood with his hands in his coat pockets. He didn't storm in, he didn't demand anything. He simply asked the receptionist what time the community meeting would begin. She glanced up at him, uncertain, then nodded toward the auditorium. Inside, parents gathered in tight clusters, murmuring over last-minute emails and anonymous leaks. Photos had made their way into the inboxes of the local press and parent associations. Graffiti, mocking grins, timestamps too precise to ignore. Whispers turned to tension. Imani and Naomi entered quietly, flanked by no one. They moved toward the front row, not hiding, not posturing, just there. Naomi clutched a folded letter. Imani's eyes scanned the crowd. Autumn sat near the aisle, her camera slung across her chest, a flash drive resting inside her coat lining. She didn't look nervous, just steady. When Principal Hargrove stepped onto the stage, his usual posture of authority was absent. Papers in hand, voice thinner than usual, he cleared his throat. Before we begin, a student wishes to address the room. Naomi stood. The paper in her hand didn't tremble. We didn't come here to fight, she read, her voice even. We came here to learn, and when that became difficult, we stayed quiet. Not because we were weak, but because we were watching. The room stilled. Autumn rose without cue. The projector blinked to life, and one by one images filled the screen. Ryan's smirk beneath a midnight street lamp, a slur etched in red. Naomi with paint on her backpack, Imani standing beside her, unreadable. No narration. No need. A few parents gasped. Others looked away. Ms. Callahan, in the back, bowed her head. The final photo was of the twins walking through the front gates on their first day. Calm, steady, unaware of what would come. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward. It was heavy. Principal Hargrove approached the podium once more. Effective immediately, he said, Ryan Briggs, Zach Wilder, and Trey Sampson are expelled. This administration apologizes for its failure to act sooner. There was no applause. Imani and Naomi stepped forward, bowed, not in submission, but in dignity. Then turned to leave. Autumn stood in their path. You changed everything, she said to Imani. Imani paused, then replied, quiet but unwavering. No, we just stopped hiding. The quiet that followed wasn't the kind born from fear. It was the silence of reckoning. Imani and Naomi had stood without raising their voices, without striking a single blow, and yet the ground beneath Westridge had shifted. Justice, it seemed, could arrive not with shouts, but with stillness. True strength isn't always loud. It's the kind that holds its shape under pressure, the kind that refuses to flinch when the world demands it. And sometimes, the most powerful act is simply choosing not to disappear.